it's Andy Austin here. I'm up at Furnace Brook again. This is where we're going to be running some events next year. It's a Q&A for IEMT, so a number of people have sent in some really good questions. Some of them I might not be able to answer, but let's see what we can do. So, first question. I've been wondering about my. With some clients I hear it a lot. My pain, my husband, my problem, my allergies. Does my fit into the myself, I and you? So this is really relating to the pronouns. It's a problem, this one, because is the word my a pronoun, or is it actually denoting a relationship? There's probably a word for that kind of word. I don't know what it is. What I would say is that the my it's active and passive. So my self is owned by whatever the speaker is. So I own myself. But if I just say myself, I would think it reasonable to assume that it's I that is communicating there. And that's largely it. Think about the difference as well between my wife and the wife. There was quite a common thing, I think, in the 70s and 80s of these stand-up. There's quite a lot of, I thought, at the time, quite unpleasant stand-up comedians, especially in the UK, who had this kind of, I'm thinking Jim Davidson here, who had this kind of act which always left me feeling quite uncomfortable. And there's a lot of sexism and racism in it, but not how it would be measured today. It was probably quite different then. But it would always be the wife. So there's an objectification rather than personification. But at the same time, if I talk about the wife instead of my wife, but it's my wife I'm talking about when I say the ownership aspect isn't there, it's presumed. So there's a level of presumption that is given when we use the instead of my. I wouldn't necessarily do an elicitation on my, unless we're detecting some kind of weird narcissistic thing going on, or there's a greater issue. Listen to the kind of words people use a lot of. They keep recurring that word. And if people are frequently using the word my, you might want to investigate a little bit about that. Now, how you do that, I don't know. It's not something I've ever really paid too much attention to. I'm more interested in the two elements that are connected by the relationship that's denoted by my. I think that's probably all I've got on that one. Comment section is below, of course, and so if you have any additional thoughts or observations on the use of my, if you're aware of some proper academic research rather than the stuff that I come up with, do please quote it, because I'm sure that will be quite useful for other people, and as well as myself, of course. So I think that's all I've got on the first question. Let's look at question number 2. Now, as I read through these questions, I noticed that Mickey has introduced a comment here as well, basically pointing out that in different languages we have different prefixes and pronouns that get used, and not everything, of course, actually translates into different languages. Now, I don't know any other languages apart from English, so I can't offer any comment or input on those things. Here's what I do know, though. I think there is a huge area of research and probable publication for some people, if you're interested in the linguistics, around how do the pronouns that we use and the relationships between those pronouns, how they're shaped by the language that we use. In other countries or other languages where they don't have the same structures, they have different structures, how does that change things? How are things different for them in terms of the relationships they then have, both internal relationships with aspects of or parts of self, or with other people as well? And I think that's something that's well worth looking at. Now, what that would mean for IEMT, how that would change what you do if you're working in a different country using different languages, I generally don't know. This is something that's going to be best answered by other people, because I don't know. I would like to say that one day I'll do that research. I won't. That I'm going to leave that for other people who are far more able at these things. There is something I will add that could be useful. I generally is a position of active operation. So I express myself. Self is that which is expressed of I. So what I would suggest is that self exudes from, that's what expression is. Self-expression is express means to leak out of, to exude from. If you squish things and stuff leaks out, that's the expression of the stuff that leaks out. And so what I would suggest is that in the work that we're doing, when we consider self, this is the expression of I. It's the public face. It is what is usually seen socially. It will fit to a certain narrative. The narrative might be a false one of self. We have how many people have got false identities, but also the socially acceptable aspects of I. And of course, a lot of people try and adjust their expression so they don't include the negative aspects. We only try and show the positive side of ourselves socially, and we often will only show the positive side to ourselves and live in denial. Oh, that's not really me. That's not myself. That's just, no, I don't like to think about those things. Whereas me receives you. So me is a receptacle. It's a container of you, and you then can actually go into anything that's external of I, me, and self. So I is the sort of the active operating system. Self is what is expressed publicly from that to you, and me is what receives you. So you fill me with hope, you fill me with horror, you fill me with love, you leave me empty. Me is very much a receptacle, a way of processing and receiving you. Self is a way of communicating I to you. So it's a two-way thing that's going on there. So now we're looking at another question coming in. I have just thought of another question. Do you log the statistics of the efficacy of your procedures? If you do you have a pro forma of how to do this, which we could also use? I know that you mentioned you were doing something around eating disorders in children. How's that going, and how are you monitoring it? Okay, so this is a problem. Here's the reality. I'm not a researcher. I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to anything academic research, and most importantly, I don't have any interest in it either. So whilst I can create these things and test them out, field data, find out what happens with clients, feedback from workshops, feedback from clients, of course, which is marvelous. Everyone says it's fantastic. There's no data, there's no evidence. All of it is anecdotal. Now, the more people that are doing this, of course, the more anecdotal stuff gathers. So it looks like, okay, this stuff is real, it's effective, it's well proven. It is proven only by our experience of it. If we were to try and prove this in a courtroom, or prove this in a debate, or say in a conference, a real conference, not like the NLP conferences, real conference where people present a paper or a proposal and then it's debated and pulled apart. This would not stand up to any scrutiny whatsoever. None of the IMT would at all. So it's an area that now this has become bigger than I ever had anticipated. They're now actually going to be paying people to do some research. We've tried to do some research trials around things like psoriasis and PTSD. The problem with it is everyone's got a life, everyone's trying to pay the bills, and not everyone is in the same location. So trying to gather all the data together, actually trying to get something of substance, has spectacularly failed. And that's partly my fault, because I've not really been that interested to do it myself. So what I'm now doing is the association is now funding a research team to actually start looking at two aspects of the work. One is to test do these things work? Do these things exist? So I claim there's 5 patterns of chronicity. So what's the evidence for that? Do we have proof that people with long-term health problems have these 5 patterns? And do these patterns occur? My dog is just going nuts around the corner, so I'm just going to make sure he's not killing some creature. Just bear with me. So what we have then is a research team who are going to be looking at the presuppositions of IEMT, for want of a better thing. So do the 5 patterns exist? When we have the axis deviation, those 4 things that are submodality shifts, do they actually occur? Are those submodality changes triggered by the axis deviations that we see? So this is just a test. The work that we are doing, does that even exist? Of course it does. I just want the clinical evidence. And then the other one is we're looking at the efficacy of these techniques. So when we apply these things to people, what happens? Do we have documented evidence that afterwards people's symptoms are better and their lives are improved and so forth? I'm now how many weeks? Probably about 3 or 4 weeks post-corona. It's an incredibly short of breath. Anyway, I shall take deep breaths, carry on. So then part of that work, this is now we're looking really 6 months to probably 2 years in terms of this. And obviously, as you can imagine, this is quite expensive. But we have enough money in the kitty for the IMT Association, I can begin to fund it. But we will be applying for research grants and so forth. That's now beginning. That's not like, oh, that's a long way off. We've now got the people in place, they're writing up the proposals, and in theory, by the time I get home and start editing this video, we will have something in place and beginning. So that's the situation on research. Now, am I gathering data? How do I measure it? I don't. What I do is long-term follow-up. Less so these days because I've got enough data from previous long-term follow-ups to satisfy that I know what I'm looking at. When I do client work and one-to-one sessions with people, largely I'm leaving a lot of responsibility for follow-up to the client. So if they still have problems, they'll get in contact with me. I quite frequently get contact from people 2 or 3 years after I've worked with them, which is that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the work we did. I never had the opportunity to say thank you, which of course is great for the ego. It's very flattering and so forth, and makes me feel good. But it's also kind of reassuring because so often we don't hear anything from the clients to find stuff. Now, the work that I'm doing with clients isn't about data gathering and doing research. It's about giving them the service that they are requesting from me and paying for. Plus, it takes an awful lot of time to gather data and fill in forms and all the rest. So I don't have anything. I don't do that. I can't pretend otherwise. So anyone who's watching this who has the kind of forms that you would be filling in to gather data, and I don't mind sharing it, do please post it in the comment section. Because I know there will be people such as Mavis who asked this question who are looking to do that level of work with people. And so it'd be really good to actually provide something for them. One of the things I'm really keen to have start to happen is a lot more contribution and collaboration from members of the IMT Association. There's a small number of us, very small number of us, who are doing all the work. And a lot of people wait for us to be taking the initiative. I would welcome more people to come forward and take these initiatives and start developing this stuff. When I started out, this whole IEMT thing started off as a 2-hour workshop. I wasn't calling it IEMT back then. And then it got popular and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. It grew bigger and quicker than I think I ever would have imagined. And I never thought it would even be something that people are still teaching and playing with today. It was just something I was doing on one particular year that caught my interest. And then of course it appeared it caught a lot of other people's interest too. So if you're into the research stuff, if you're into data collection, you'd like to crunch the data and analyze it, and you fancy getting in touch, get in touch, because we would be delighted to basically share some of this workload. And obviously, it's not that particular thing, it's not a workload I'll be doing. Okay, so next question. What is the youngest child you've worked with? I would say probably 6. I know I've worked, the youngest I can remember was 8 years old. I'm sure I have worked with someone who's younger. However, I have to put some provisos in here and some qualifiers. I don't like doing therapy on children for a number of reasons. Mostly because most children I've ever done an assessment on or gone to see, and I always see them in the context of the school or the family home. I'll go around for dinner, or I will attend the classroom at the school. So I'm never putting the child in the context of receiving therapy or being therapized. For them, I'm just inserting myself as normally into their environment without demarcating them to be something different. It's a horrible, horrible thing when we drug children with psychiatric drugs and give them a label and identify them as being something very, very different to who they really are. We've turned them from being who they are into a non-person defined by a psychiatric label. I think it's absolutely disgraceful that happens in any culture. And it seems to be happening more and more and more and more. And then we have the new age things happening. So we don't have attention deficit disorder. No, my child are different. My children are indigo children, and they're special. Oh my God. Oh no, I don't believe in labeling my children. I don't believe in giving them Ritalin. I use homeopathic remedies instead. It's the same fucking thing. Okay, fewer side effects, but the social effects are very high. So that is always what I have in mind when I'm referred or asked to work with any child. My number one thing is, does the child want to work with me? Not work with a therapist, not work with someone who's doing IEMT or any of the other. They want to work with me. That's really important. And I'll ask them that right up front with their parent present. And if there's any hesitation, and I won't just say, do you want to work with me? I won't. I'll just say, okay, so here's the question I've got to ask you. Do you actually want to be here, or are you just here because you've been told to? Now, I know right now, you're being scrutinized by everybody. You have to give the right answer because you might get told off later for giving the wrong one. I tell you what, we'll do away with that. You can just tell me the truth because I'm not part of that system and I have some things to say. So I will often show that I'm on the side of the child and I understand the social dynamic of what they're currently experiencing. So when the kind of things I've worked with, I worked with a young girl, I forget, I would say she's about 8 years old. She was weird because she was that unbelievably smart 8-year-old. I mean, brain the size of a planet. Mother was a single mother, great lady. She phoned me up to say, my daughter wants to come and work with you. I was like, okay, how old? I'm thinking the daughter's going to be like, 18. 8. Your daughter is 8 and she's found you on the internet. It turns out the kid is a super math genius to ridiculous degree. The teachers at school can't educate her in maths. It's the other way around. She had a particular thing. I think she was going to be putting in for some exam, Mensa or something ridiculous, and wanted help because she wanted to be sure that she would pass. Perfect. That's the kind of kid I want to work with. So that's not a therapy issue. For me, that's a coaching, educational process. I've had kids with what I regard as stupid problems. Phobia of dogs, for example. Standard, kids scared of dogs, got bit or saw someone else get bit, wants to overcome that fear because their family are getting a dog or their neighbour kids have got a dog and the kid wants to get rid of that fear. Absolutely fine. When I have a kid who is told that they have a psychiatric malfunction and they're like 5, here's what I do. I will work with the family, not the child. Now, I'll be careful how I frame this because obviously parents always think they're the ones to blame, and a lot of the time they might be right, they might be to blame. But it's not really their fault because they're obviously just doing what normal people do and they've got a challenging situation that's arisen. So what I'll tend to do is I'll say to the family, okay, the reality is it's going to be really expensive for me to be doing endless one-to-ones with your child to try and fix this problem because this is a developmental thing as much as it is a therapeutic thing. So I reckon it's going to be better that I work with you, teach you what I know, because you're going to have far greater contact with your child than I ever will. And most importantly, I'm going to be spending so much time assessing your child. How would I know? How do I really know who your child is? Because of all the limitations built into interviewing a child therapeutically. You know your child better than I ever will. So I'll teach you what I know and we can work from there and I can give you guidance. So that's the frame I'll use. However, I have this thing in my mind that tells me how easy it is that people can use therapy oppressively. I saw this happen in psychiatry, in residential psychiatry. I've seen this happen in EFT. I'm tempted to put the videos up so you can actually see what it is I'm referring to. But it's that classic thing of, even though I'm really angry right now, I deeply and completely accept myself. And the parent is an anger-provoking arsehole. The child is both on the receiving end of a lot of inappropriate double binding type communications from the parent. The parent can't see what they're doing. They learn a simple therapeutic technique for children. When the child reacts in a justifiably reasonable way to parents' conduct, rather than being sent to their room and separate them, they're told, now you have to do this self-therapy because you've got anger issues. Wow. And so much therapy is done like that to children, directly and indirectly, and sometimes the therapist is the agent who's actually doing that to the child because they can't see what's happening in the family context. They're merely looking at surface level symptoms from the child and completely fail to see what's really going on at a sociological, environmental level. So that's why I'm very reluctant to do any therapy with children unless it's regarding what I think of as stupid problems like phobias or very simple little things like that, which are just, you teach the child the process to do, they do the process themselves. When I have a child, I will never sit in front of the child and go, okay, now look at my finger and move, that's it, well done, keep thinking of I never do that. Never do that. There's no need. Every child I've ever worked with, admittedly not a great number, but every child, all I've done is I've taught them the technique and told them what they could do and leave it at that. They can then implement that themselves or not, as the case may be. I won't do therapy to a child or on a child. I think my favourite one was, it was following a, I'm trying to remember the incident now. I think, I might be making this up now, but it was a classic phobia resulting from a trauma. Supposing it was like a car accident or something like that. And it was very clear that the sensitizing incident was very, very raw for this young kid. So what I pretty much did was I talked about the double dissociation phobia cure. I get it, I know the PTSD phobia thing, but essentially all I did was teach them about how this would work. I used sort of dolls, basically, for want of a better thing, and drawings to show the different perceptual positions the person can take, and that is all I did. And later on the kid said, well, through the parents, that the problem was no longer a problem, because I taught the child how to re-evaluate their own thinking and their own experience, and they implemented it themselves. So that was kind of like this PTSD phobia cure without actually doing it. I just talked them through the process and left it at that. Do we teach parents the tapping, to do eye movements on the child and so forth? I'm very, very unlikely to do that. Am I likely to be pulling up family issues and parental issues that they are facing themselves and work directly on those? Absolutely. So I'm not going to be teaching them to do therapy to the child. That's the frame that I use to open up the relationship. What I do is I basically therapize the parents to put them in a better position to be able to deal with the situation they've got. I think that's probably what I've got with children. It's not a massive area of my work. Face it, how many parents go, oh, I know, I'll take my child to Andrew T. Austin? Of course they're not. I don't have the image or the brand that would appeal to parents to bring me their children. There are people I know within the IMT Association, Mavis being one of them, who are former teachers and educational specialists. And so they've got the branding, they've also got the experience to be able to work very effectively in those areas. Why? They've also had children. I've never had children myself, that I know of. So I don't have that kind of experience, or what's the word, manner about me that say, hey, I'm child friendly. So I think I'd be interested actually with this one. If you do therapy with children, where are your ethics with it? Do they match with mine that I've expressed, or do you have a different view on this? Remember, when it comes to ethics, there isn't a blanket statement that's going to apply to all people in all contexts. And I've been watching a video this morning, quite a funny one, where some person in the particular field in which I used to be part of is talking about ethics, and he keeps using the word ethics quite a lot. Kind of funny, because he's one of the most unethical people I've ever encountered in my life, lecturing people on ethics. To measure everybody by the same set of ethics is probably not going to be very helpful or useful, because there's so many variables. Now, as an association, we have a code of ethics. They're fairly generic. Some organizations will have very, very specific and rigid sets of ethics around things, the code of conduct that they have. That might be important to restrict the application of the work to specific contexts. And so that's another area. We have the ethics of ethics, which I think is a conversation we ought to have as an association. So if you have any views on that, comment section below. And so the other part of the question was, what am I doing regarding the children and eating disorders? This is not something I've put anything out there publicly about yet. Sorry, just in case you wonder, the sound might be a bit strange because I'm in the sound chamber. We're in the round room, and this is used for weird audio stuff. And it's very, very strange because if you sit on the edge, the acoustics are very, very different. If you come into the middle, you get an echo coming from all directions. Normally, you only get an echo coming from a single direction. Or maybe if you're in a valley, it might be two. But here, it's really strange because I can hear my own voice in a very, very different way to how... Anyway, it's very strange. In fact, I'm going back outside again. Or let's try it over here. Now, if I come over here, it changes. And if I move into the middle, it all starts to change. Very strange. And we have this thing, it's a donger thing, I don't know what it's called, a donger thing, to make strange noises. Let's just try it. I have no musical ability. So for the last 10 to 10 months, I've been doing stuff with what's known as ARFID. It's essentially selective restrictive eating. So you get young people who will just live off jam sandwiches or just eat chips, and they won't eat anything else. It's incredibly selective and restrictive. Now, I was horrified when I came across the term ARFID, because clearly this is not a psychiatric condition. There is something else going on here. I believe this is a sociological phenomenon, and that we're seeing this mostly in developed nations. We're not seeing this in third world or undeveloped countries. And interestingly, in the research I've been doing, it's beginning to become very big in India, as India has economically expanded and developed at a phenomenal rate. We're seeing a lot more kids over there who are also developing ARFID. Now, it tends to have two onsets, either as a baby, so it's very, very early. Are babies influenced by sociological phenomena? Or slightly later in adolescence. And there seems to be two conditions going on at the same time for people that both end up with the same label. And generally it's regarded and treated as though it's some kind of phobia. This is not fussy eating or picky eating. This is not going to be that thing, if you just starve them long enough, eventually they'll start eating. They won't. They literally won't. And so it's very, very incapacitating for them. And you have adults, increasing number of adults, of course, because these kids are growing up with long-term health issues and also suffering from the consequences of highly restrictive eating. So I'm doing some work around there, and I think now I've nailed it, that I have an intervention for it, and I haven't yet tested it. So I've been doing field data. I've been gathering lots of field data from various clinicians, and most of all from ARFID sufferers, selective eating, as well as parents. I've been doing lots of surveys, and I've had hundreds and hundreds, way more responses than I ever anticipated getting. And the patterns of the manifestation of it is very, very distinct. So I'm able to see the age of onset is likely to result in specific current manifestation of the problems. So for some people, it's predominantly a fear of choking. And that's the thing, it's the texture is likely to be driving that. For other people, it's going to be appearance and flavour, and there's other stuff going along there. Is also heavily paralleled with various other childhood diagnostic criteria, which again I question the validity of. So virtually everyone who had texture, it was a very early onset, and virtually everyone who is appearance and flavour, they are diagnosed with either attention deficit disorder and or Asperger's or autistic spectrum disorders. They seem to go hand in hand. So for me, there seems to be much more of a sociological phenomenon going on than a psychiatric malfunction. But by treating it as a psychiatric malfunction, I think we miss all the possibilities of how this can be treated. So now what I've got to do is actually start doing field testing. I've got the field data, I've got the model, I'm pretty certain I've got the answer. I've now got to test it. At the moment, the whole COVID-19 thing and my own suffering of COVID-19 has kind of shelved everything for that. So I'll probably resume field testing of that next year, and I'll start recruiting in adults who have this so they can self-select to come and see me as part of the test process. Once I've done that, then I'll start actually then advertising it so other people can test out these things too, and then we'll get some research done and so forth. It's all a long way off yet. So those who don't know ARFID, and those in India who are watching this, it's something you may want to start to pay attention to, because this is a growing phenomena. There was a time when there was very little selective eating going on as a problem. There's a lot more of it around, and it is growing. Part of me wonders, is this expanding at the same rate and speed as deliberate self-harm is reducing? Who knows? Maybe it's a different sociological phenomena of exactly the same thing. I'm now inside a parachute, of all things. This is actually going to be a tent for camping. So another question coming is a long question. I'm going to summarise it how I understand the question to mean, because it's one of those ones that's got so many points to it. And it's about the distribution of pronouns when you're talking to somebody. In the training course, we deliberately evoke the pronouns. So when you think of I, when you all those kind of things. In real life, that's not what I do. I don't ask those questions to a client. There's no need to. I'm just tracking when they are talking, how they're using the pronouns, and what the associations are with them. I was going to catch my breath again, and I'll carry on. So, for example, the person might say, I hate myself. I just don't like being me. Right, I'm going to write those words down, because they've just told me pretty much everything I need to know. I might well ask, that I that hates self, how old is I? But I'm not going to do the elicitation as it's taught in the course. You can do that if you're working with clients, and I used to get amazing results doing it that way. But as you get more familiar with these terms, essentially what you're doing is you're just listening out for them. And you can just feed them back and ask additional questions around the specific context in which they ask them. You can't miss it once you know these things. But if you aren't familiar, what I used to teach was do 100 elicitations as it's taught in the course. Once you get all the patterns, once you're really, really familiar with it, you can't not hear it after that. So I really hate myself. So I obviously is the active part that's hating, and self is hated. So there's two things going on, the act of hate and the act of being hated, but they're affecting different aspects of identity. Now, some people are going to use I a lot when they are discussing anything about themselves. Some people refer to themselves all the time. Some people are going to use constantly the you pronoun in place of I or any other. And some people will be, it's all about me. Now, there's a biasing here. I've never taught this before, by the way. So what you're going to find is a very strong biasing and an orientation of a person has in terms of how they present their identity within the environment in which they're talking. This may change across contexts. So in the environment in which they're talking, when I'm talking to them, they're seeing a therapist, or they're seeing Andrew T. Austin, whatever identity role they have got in their head through my marketing and presentation of who I am, and so forth. In that context, they might be biasing to be I all the way through. In some emails, every single paragraph begins with I. I always look out for those things. And I'm acutely aware that I tend to initially write my email replies like that, and then I quickly go through and change them afterwards. Because the biasing is, am I thinking from my first person position? Am I constantly referring to me? So that's putting me at effect of you or other. Remember, me is a container, it's a receptacle. So me is at effect. Am I constantly talking about myself? So I'm talking about how my social face, my expression of self. We have these different focuses. Some people focus entirely on you, so they never actually have to be involved in any of this stuff and change themselves, or change me, or change I. So when you listen out for the biasing, also pay attention to the context of the relationship they're forming with the source of the thing they're talking about. So when I'm always talking about I'm always talking about me, I'm always talking about you as though you're me, I'm always talking about myself. You'll get a lot of additional data. Just start listening out for the biasing as well. All right, so the next question is, how many practitioners have been trained worldwide? I don't know, quite a lot. All I can actually tell you, because it's the only statistic I have, data I have, is how many members we have. I'm not at home now, so I can't look what today's membership level is, but we're about 550 members worldwide, and growing quite steadily. It's worth understanding a little bit about what motivates people to go and do a training course, especially in something like IEMT or any other training. I just need to show you something here. This is what I have constantly. Him just dropping the, he's just dropping dropping the stick at my feet constantly. I've already got bruised toes. So we have, I think, about 550 members worldwide. The people who come on the training courses, I always say it's the rule of threes. So about a third of the people are people with problems, and they're coming along as a personal development thing. They want to learn how to deal with some of the issues they have, and so on. So the motivation there is not actually people who, right, enough. They're not actually people who are looking to become a practitioner or carry a certification. And they get out of it what they want to. About a third of the people are people who will go on to become a practitioner. They want to get certified, so they do the assessment and join the association. And the reason they come to the course is because it's an additional skill set. And then you have about a third of the people who are largely practitioners or therapists of some description with problems, and so they're coming along for their own personal development and so forth. So a lot of people are motivated, and this was my motivation for both developing this work but also getting into this area of work in the first place, was I was a guy with a lot of problems. I had to do something about it. I wasn't getting the help through the normal services, psychological services, psychiatry, medication, all the usual, and I started to explore these things. And so there's a lot of people who are also in exactly the same position. So they are often the most motivated because they've got a reason to learn the material and test it. So they generally are, that's the split of people. The latter group may not necessarily go on to become a practitioner, because most of the existing therapists who are coming along with problems to do additional personal development, they already have their field. They might be an NLPer, so they identify as an NLP practitioner. They might be a hypnotherapist, they might be an EFTer, or so forth. So they're not necessarily then going to join the association now to add IEMT practitioner to their listing. And then, of course, you have the other category, which is probably another third, so 4/3, which are people who are coming along for really what is recreational education, and a great thing for people to do. So what can I do this weekend? Well, I can go and stay in somewhere different, go to stay in a hotel, meet new people, maybe a chance of something else, a bit of love, learn something new, have a great time, and hopefully benefit overall from that. So the recreational educational market is also a significant factor within who attends IMT trainings. Now, of course, in terms of membership, we then have the issue of retention, and I'm trying to increase retention. On average, people who then leave the association, they're a member for 3 years then before losing interest and dropping out. And when I've surveyed people who've dropped out, the predominant reason is their lives have moved on. They've got married, they've gone back to the day job, they've discovered the thing that works for them. So they're now a tapper, they're now an NLPer, they're a hypnotist, or whatever the field is they go into. And so they found their thing, so they're going to drop the costs of other things too. And so that's always interesting too, is where do a lot of these people end up? But the smaller percentage of attendees of the trainings themselves end up identifying as IEMT practitioners. I don't have any better data than that. I've got to move because the guys who are working on this caravan here have come back. This has just been installed this morning, and they're now putting in the steps and the other accommodation block as well. By the way, when we do events next year, you can stay in this if you want to. There's going to be others around as well, around the site. Just I've showed the back of it. So this is an original Romany caravan, and it's just been restored. And yeah, they're just towing up another one now, so I shall get out of the way. Right, so the next question. What makes IEMT so special compared with other techniques, i.e. psychoanalysis, counselling, transaction analysis, EMDR, etc.? Then again, you have the personal development methods like NLP and all the rest. In other words, why should I use IEMT over other methods? I love that question. That is actually, I think, my question of the day. What makes IEMT so special? Well, obviously, I made it. It's the best model ever made. It's proven. It's clinically brilliant. No, it's just something that is a set of tools that works some of the time for some of the people. It's just that when it's used for the right person in the right context at the right time, the results are very quick and very effective. It's not the only way of working. It's not the best way of working. It's a way of working. We've got to be realistic. It's not a rival to or any of the other therapeutic processes. What we tend to see in every therapeutic discipline, I saw the same in the hospital as well, it's no different. The intensive care nurses see themselves in some kind of competition, say to the neurosurgical nurses, who see themselves in some competition to the cardiac nurses. They all claim to have the highest possible status and be most important and deserve the most funding and the most accolade. It's a job. It doesn't matter whether you're working in outpatient elderly care, which no one wants to do, or cardiac surgery with the top funded department in the planet. It's a job that's a very important job, and no one is more important than the other. So as soon as we have this status and hierarchy thing going on, we tend to get a rivalry, and as soon as we get a rivalry, the comparisons are made. Everything really has a value in some context. Now, I'm just putting the glasses in my pocket here. People know what I think of EFT. I think, even though I am Andrew T. Austin, I deeply and completely accept myself, that kind of stuff is absolute nonsense. However, There are plenty of contexts where I will use that, and there are times I have used that, simply because that is exactly the thing that is needed for that client in that moment. That is exactly it's the most perfect way of working for that person. Is that the perfect way of working for everyone I see? No, we have to tailor what we're doing to specific individuals. I mean, this is the stuff that Bandler and Grinder were talking about when they first developed NLP. Essentially, they were saying, pay attention to the patient, pay attention to the human being in front of you, model out what's actually happening, and create a technique. Once you have structured the problem, your intervention should match the structure of the problem to deal with it. As soon as we get one size fits all, you have the person who's the psychoanalyst who does psychoanalysis on all problems. You have the CBTer who does CBT on all problems. The hypnotist who does regression therapy to cause, who does regression therapy to cause. The person who taps the chakras on all... Oh, for God's sake, it's exasperating. So really, how many models should we learn? There's a question. I think that if we were to learn NLP modeling, so we learn actually how do we look at the structure of an experience, that is a really good place to start. However, for a lot of people, that's the end point as well. That's a good starting point, and I think it's essential for people to learn that work. Look at the early books of Bandler and Grinder. The books that were written before the idiots got involved and then turned it into this kind of ridiculous thing that we see today. So get all the look on eBay, best place to look. Here we go. Then you're going to need to learn a number of techniques. Now, I genuinely believe, if you were to use, say, metaphors of movement, that's the other model that actually came out of IEMT, and you got NLP modeling, that will cover a lot of the work you're going to do. Now, here's the thing though, I still refer people out. I've just referred somebody out this week because they have an issue that I think they need a different process. I won't say what the process is, and I know of a particular person who can do that process 100 times better than I can. So I'm going to refer them to that person. I also think if you had IEMT, metaphors of movement, Connie Ray Andreas's work of the wholeness process and core transformation, and you're trained in NLP modeling, so you understand all the submodalities and all that kind of stuff as well, I think that's going to pretty much cover 99% of what you'd ever be presented with the client. However, when you've got those set of skills, you understand the metaphorical structure of therapeutic interventions, then you could use EFT, for example, as a therapeutic intervention, because you can detect the metaphorical structure the client has matches the metaphorical structure of EFT. So therefore, that's the process to use, and so forth. So then you could actually invent your own therapeutic interventions too. That's the basis of modeling. So what I'm keen to have happen, or not have happen, is I don't want to replicate the NLP community. I'm not talking about Bandler and Grinder, the original innovators, the original works that these guys did, or the model they came up with. Still think that's superb. It's the people. It's the people that came along and went, oh, we can make a living, we can make some money out of this, oh, I can be important. Oh, I'm more important than you people. And then the factions, the word I learned the other day, the Grand Falloon. The Grand Falloon is the association of people that exists purely for the sake of existing. It is nothing. A lot of these NLP societies, associations, boards, guilds, we've got so many of them, there's more and more cropping up every week. A lot of them exist merely to be important. They're not important and they're not representative. But because they create the illusion of being important, people join them. And now once people join them, I'm a member of this group. I'm not a member of that group. Meanwhile, that group are going, we're members of this group, we're not a member of that group. And a rivalry begins. And then with that rivalry, you have these absurd ideological differences start to emerge. And we follow this lineage of training. They follow that lineage of training. We don't like them because they're the wrong lineage. It's just like religion. It's absolutely no different to what we saw with Christianity, and especially in the UK, of the Protestant and Catholic divides and Grand Falloons. Great word, look it up. It's absolutely fantastic. I think it was Kirk Vonnegut, is that how you say it? I think it was in one of his novels. I'll put a link somewhere on this video. So, what I'm keen to avoid happening with IMT is I don't want the IMT association to become a Grand Falloon. It will not become a grand falloon. And it's also why I periodically have removed people from the association. You'll know who I've removed from the association or cancelled as a trainer, because you see what they write about me. I go from being, oh yes, you are our leader, your work is the best work I've ever done, this is the most amazing, and then they hate me, and then I'm the worst human being on the planet. So they pretty much self-identify quite readily, which is unfortunate, because surely they have better things to do. Maybe they don't, and that's why they're no longer in the association. So don't start to think in terms of, is this better than that? For example, some people say, well, is EMDR better or worse than IMT? Is IMT better than EMDR? EMDR is a different model. It has different applications. It has a different philosophy, a different psychotheology behind it. It's practiced in different contexts by different people with qualification, usually in a psychiatric or licensed psychologist office, or a licensed psychotherapist. It has different application in a different context and for different people. A lot of clients for EMDR are self-selecting. They go and get EMDR because that's the service they want to buy. For them, then to get some of those clients and give them IEMT, that may not be the thing they want, because it doesn't match what it is they need, because they've already bought into the other model. So we've got to be absolutely realistic and, for God's sake, humble. I know it's very, very difficult for therapists to actually be humble. It's not one of the things that comes easy to people, myself included, admittedly. So we've got to keep both the claims realistic, but also not set ourselves up as some kind of weird rivalry to a grand falloon that exists purely to be a rival. So is IEMT better? No. Except it will be in specific contexts, at specific times, with specific people. Will it be superior and, the thing of choice? Yes, it will be. Some of the time, for some of the people, within specific contexts. And that's what Wilson has to say on that. So I think that's all I've got to say for this video. If you have more questions, I'm going to start doing the Ask Me Anything. So as long as it's on the theme of IMT, it doesn't have to be about the material that's taught on the training course for clarification today. If you have that kind of philosophical question like we've had here, the meta questions about the field, because IMT is now an emerging field, the research that we're going to have should cement that and make it actually now an authoritative thing. Once we have the research, we will also be moving to have formal qualification. And that's my primary goal here, is formal qualification as opposed to certification. Just notice that there's an awful lot of people out there with nothing more than certificates claiming to be fully qualified. And a lot of training companies also offering full qualification. And actually all they're offering is certification. It's a big difference between the two. Anyway, if you have questions on anything relating to the field, the expansion of the IMT field, or any of these things at all, can you please email them over or get in contact via the Facebook pages. There's now a plethora of IEMT Facebook pages. I have removed myself from all but two. Basically, the two that I set up, the rest is too much for me. It's just too much. So the views expressed on those other forums may be representative, they may not be. Because remember, not everyone has to agree. It's not a grand falloon where we're all in complete agreement or else. There are people who have actually different opinions than ourselves. I know that's shocking to a lot of people. But they will differ. So you can ask questions on the two, if you want me to ask the question, easy to say, on the two forums. I'll put the links below, or just email them over to me and I will put them in the next video. So that was our little tour as well of Furnace Brook Fisheries, where we're going to be running events next year. I'm going to be doing some filming later on today to show just how much has happened in the last 2 weeks since I was last here. The development here is happening at an astonishing rate, and I've had to come over here because they got the diggers and they're doing more construction of accommodation. So we're going to be doing residential events in 2021 throughout the summer. So lots of very, very exciting things happening up here, and unfortunately you will have to spend your time here with the beasts who will insist that you throw sticks for them relentlessly. I lost the ball, I threw it and it's gone. When I got another ball, threw it and I lost that one too. I threw it into the bushes. Not very good at throwing. So yep, that is Furnace Brook. Ask any questions below, any feedback, use the comment section, and I'll see you in the next video.